Hello and welcome to a quick review of a new series that's just landed on Netflix called The Politician. Now, me and Nadia reacted to the trailer to this and we thought it looked kind of fun. It stars Ben Platt, who we'll all know from Pitch Perfect, but we'll also know from being the lead if you've been to Broadway and seen the musical Dear Evan Hansen. It also has Gwyneth Paltrow in there playing his mum. The Politician, it's really interesting actually. It landed today and I'm trying to work out who it's aimed at. I'm guessing it's aimed at slightly older than your sort of 13 Reasons Why audience, or possibly even your Riverdale audience. This is like, it's a comedy, but it's a comedy with serious undertones. I mean, that's given away right at the beginning, because there is a warning right at the beginning saying if you've suffered from any sort of mental illness, please sort of read this warning, because I think, you know, they play fast and loose with ideas of not just mental illness, but also political correctness around issues of gender fluidity. It's an irreverent watch. This is a show that doesn't mind lampooning many of the sort of mores of liberal America. I mean, it's set in a high school. It's about a boy called Payton, or a young man called Payton, who's at high school, and his ambition is to become the sort of president of the school union, effectively, over there. His ambition, though, is ultimately to become president of the United States. And the first episode begins with him in a dream, in an interview with the head of Harvard. And you know, his ambitions are vast, and I think across the season we're going to see his ambitions stretch way beyond high school. But this first episode is set within high school and him competing against a chap called River. This is produced by the people who brought us American Horror Story. So there is weirdly an element of musicality to it, but there's also an element of well, gallows humour, that thing that American Horror Story has. It's almost cartoonish in its approach, and yet unlike American Horror Story, where I sometimes think American Horror Story could go thematically a bit deeper, I do think there are deeper themes in this. I was quite pleasantly surprised. Interestingly, Jessica Lange's in there, playing the mother of a girl who's suffering from cancer. The first scene was brilliant. He's in this interview in Harvard. It's a dream. He's talking about the fact that he admires Reagan. He talks about the presidents of TV. He likes Reagan. He likes Bush. He's clearly parked on the Republican side of things. And we establish the fact that he's an adopted son. So although Gwyneth Paltrow is his mum, which we find out later, we also establish really early on that he's not, you know, he's obviously adopted. And there's this really nice thing parked right at the beginning of whether he can feel emotions like other normal people. Is he a bit emotionally stunted? And where Ben Platt plays this character so well is, it's very hard to play someone who's slightly emotionally disengaged and disassociated with the world, but then also play them as having consciousness about that. It's easy to play them as just like that, but to play that character like that, so he's sort of, when he feels emotions, he's emulating emotions, he's imitating emotions that he sees. And so the head of Harvard in this dream sequence at the beginning says, "Have you ever cried?" And Ben Platt's character, Payton, says, "I've cried when I've watched It's a Wonderful Life, the movie." And the principal says, "But everyone cries at that." And Ben Platt says, "Yes, I know. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? You know, because is it real? Is it fake? Is it just because everyone does? Is he watching behaviour?" So right at the beginning, you realise, once you've got to the end of episode 1, this is as much about Ben Platt's personality. Is he a sociopath? Is he a psychopath? Is he suffering from depression? Is he slightly on the spectrum and therefore struggles to read so-called normal emotions? And let's face it, what the hell are normal emotions? And then we go into the titles. Now, the title sequence I thought was really nifty. The title sequence is like one of those old curiosity boxes that you get almost in art drawers, where you've got lots of little wooden sort of sections where you can put printing blocks and things like that, and knickknacks and historic and antique things into sliding drawers with lots of... And you see all these things being put in. And what these things are is they're being put into a wooden box, but then there's a wooden exterior to the box, which is the shape of his body. So in a sense, they're sort of inferring, even in the title sequence, that he's had to construct and collate his personality from things he's found and things he's learned. And then they chisel his wood, the wood of his outside, and then they paint him. So, you know, is he real? Does he know what's real? Does anyone know what's real? So I think it's quite clever in that it taps into that dislocation I think most people feel with the world. You know, we're slightly distanced, we feel a bit weird, we don't feel like we belong. Then the first scene is a scene with River, his competition basically for president of the school. and he's sleeping with his girlfriend. It's quite an interesting scene, again, about faking it. She says she faked her enjoyment of sex. He says, I don't want you to fake it. He wants her to be more authentic. She says, okay, I'll act being more authentic. And he's like, no, I want you to be actually authentic. And so again, immediately, I think this is very crisp dialogue and crisp script, where we're dovetailing between quite sophisticated ideas, and we just scratch them and then we move on. So I like that scene. And River is established as a really compassionate character. He's a bit of a hippie boy. He's clearly troubled. What transpires is that once River's girlfriend has gone out of the house where he lives, Payton comes in to see him and says, what the hell are you doing? You're standing up against me for the president of the high school. And it's established that they've both had a bit of a fling together, Payton and River. So a bit of a homosexual undertext there. Although the whole episode engages with the fact that everyone's sexuality and gender identity is very fluid, and it's a really good series in a sense for just making that an accepted norm within the school. There's a wonderful scene where Payton and River are standing up on the podium at school in an assembly situation, and they're having to essentially, it's like the hustings of an election, they're essentially having to appeal to their electorate, and Payton gives a very sort of straight down the middle description of why should we edit the contents of a Mark Twain book because of the racism, and he's very, it's a very sort of measured response. And then River gives this incredibly almost Clinton-esque sort of takes the microphone off the stand, walks down into the crowd. And so what's set up in this episode is this great competition between two political teams. The team that's supporting Payton, which is very much the more affluent, they're sort of preppy girls with pearl necklaces, and one of them is actually Payton's girlfriend, and they're very sort of stern-faced. And then you've got the more sort of hippie type of River. There's a lot of fun had with the idea that each candidate for presidency of the high school is looking to find someone as their running mate, so their sort of vice president, if you like, who is relatable. And one of the things they go for are issues of disability or gender fluidity, or in one instance, a girl that's dying of or suffering from cancer. So, it doesn't mind touching upon some of the taboo subjects of how cynical many politicians are, and how the world of politics is, and how the world of society is. And there's a wonderful line in there whilst they're on the hustings where Payton starts to sweat as he realises River's got the touch of the people, and he's got that sort of Midas touch of being able to walk around the crowd and walk and talk at the same time. They say, oh, he's walking and talking, and then one of them says, Payton, look, he's sweating like Nixon. There's some nice crisp little lines, and so I really like the way in which this show was translating White House politics, American politics, into a high school setting. It's a neat conceit. And I think in a time now where politics is so extraordinarily satirical in itself, I mean, you can barely take the piss out of any politicians or the politics in America or the UK, because it's all so staggeringly ridiculous. We then are introduced to Jessica Lange, who is the girl suffering from cancer's mum. And there's a scene, we meet them coming into a restaurant where they're trying to get a table, and I quite quickly felt that there was a bit of a scam going on here, where Jessica Lange's obviously either exploiting the fact that her daughter's got cancer or is taking advantage of it. And as I say, River, who's running up against Payton, he finds a running mate who is described as a gender non-conforming African-American. And so again, it's playing with lightheartedly these ideas of what minority boxes need to be ticked and things like that, in order to be seen to be relatable and electable. Payton again goes round to confront River about the fact that he's taken on this running mate, and describes River's girlfriend as Lady Macbeth. In fact, it's more the girlfriend that Payton feels is trying to gain power rather than River himself. And River himself doesn't seem particularly interested in winning the election even. But most dramatically of all, what happens in this scene is River shoots himself in the head, blood all over Payton, cut. And that was a very dramatic moment. We then cut to 18 months earlier, where we see Payton at home with Gwyneth Paltrow in the most opulent wealth. I mean, stupidly wealthy setting. These two brilliantly drawn characters who are the biological sons of Gwyneth Paltrow, but also happen to be Payton's, therefore, half-sibling, well, siblings in a sense, because he's adopted. But they're such bullying meathead jocks, and as they bounce around, the lines that they've got, they're high-fiving about ridiculous things, they're bullies. Their mother calls them, Gwyneth calls them, you're bullies and borderline psychopaths, and when she calls them that, they leap up and high-five each other. I mean, that's how psychotic they are. Gwyneth, I have to say, is absolutely brilliant. I mean, I haven't seen Gwyneth Paltrow in much that I've really enjoyed, but she plays this really nicely. A sort of, fag smoking, painting, landed gentry type, and she says some incredibly beautiful words to Payton to make him feel loved. And this is 18 months earlier, don't forget, and she's brought in a new Mandarin teacher, and this is where River and Payton first meet, not at school, and end up kissing and presumably having sex. So we see that flashback. And then we cut back to the now, and we see Payton sitting on the doorstep of River's house with blood all over him, and River's girlfriend arrives and says, and essentially blames him for the murder. And then we go to the funeral scene. Now, this was the one moment in the episode. Now, I know in American Horror Story they have moments of musicality and moments where they sing, but it's often done in such a sort of almost Rocky Horror Picture Show, or quite a grand guignol. It's always a bit morbid and a bit gothic and a bit cool. But in this, there was a scene where he sings. Now, obviously, the actor is a great singer, because he was brilliant in Dear Evan Hansen. We're huge fans of the musical. We saw it on Broadway. And he sings a song at River's funeral wake. And I have to confess, it was the one beat where my right armpit started to sweat, and it just tugged against the rest of the show. Now, I know that Ryan Murphy, the producer, is also into Broadway musicals, but it was just the one part of it that it wasn't sung brilliantly. It wasn't that it wasn't acted and sung beautifully. It really was. But it just made me feel a bit embarrassed. I just had to look away, and it was just the one wrong note for me. I just didn't need the singing. But what transpires after the singing, it's the only moment in the show where that happens, is that Astrid, River's girlfriend, the guy who's killed himself, she decides to run in his stead. And it makes you wonder whether everyone was right in the beginning. Maybe it's Astrid who had ambitions, and whilst she's blamed Payton for River's death, in a weird way, maybe Astrid has pushed him there, because let's not forget, she was quite bold and quite sort of harsh in saying to River at the beginning that she was faking her sexual enjoyment with him. So I think Astrid is clearly someone to look out for. What does Payton's team do in response to this? Payton's team comes up with this idea. Payton's girlfriend, who's an incredibly, pearl necklace, incredibly straight, incredibly posh, incredibly wealthy, decides to pretend that they should pretend that she's split up with him to get the sympathy vote. And I won't go into the details of it, but it's very funnily done. It's very wittily done, and I like it. And he has to show that he's heartbroken. He has to walk through the school doing a sympathy walk, and that's all really good. And I have to say once again that Ben Platt plays this brilliantly. It's a one tracking shot of him walking through the school. They set it up so that he'll pass his girlfriend. He'll look sad. She'll look back regrettably. Everyone in the school is swirling around Ben Platt's character and sort of saying, "Oh look, we're sorry." Even his new Mandarin teacher is saying, "I'll give you an A," because it's all so sad. So he's winning the sympathy vote, but we now know that Astrid's up against him, and so he now goes hard on trying to get the girl suffering from cancer. Her name is Infinity. What a brilliant name. Infinity. I'm presuming there's an irony in there in that she won't live for infinity. But yeah, so he's going to go and get, so he goes to Jessica Lange and Infinity's home to woo Jessica Lange and convince Infinity to be his running mate. Whilst there, Jessica Lange is this opportunistic, horrible, wily. She's brilliant. I mean, she's great in all the American Horror Stories. We love her. And she plays the part brilliantly. She's sort of grabby. She's opportunistic. She's conniving. You can see it in the back of her eyes. She's hungry for money and all that kind of stuff. But Infinity, the girl, steps in and says, I don't believe you, Payton. I think you're conning us. I think you're just saying all this because you want me to run. Then Payton falls to pieces in the most dramatic way, spitting saliva everywhere, sobbing all over the thing. Brilliantly performed yet again. And I have to confess, I believed him. I thought, oh no, okay, he's seen the light. His best friend's died. And then she signs up to be his running mate. Infinity says, oh, okay, I'll do it. I'll sign up. And then, of course, we cut to him saying to his political team of friends and his girlfriend, we got her. So he is a sociopath. He is a psychopath. He doesn't care about, in his head, lying to a cancer sufferer to take them on board. And then when he's standing in the crowd listening to Infinity appealing to the crowds, and all of Payton's team are going, oh yeah, her relatability and her like, all the likes says 80%, this is really good, this is really good. Another chap in the school comes up behind Payton and says to him, you do realise she's scamming everyone. She's faking it. And the episode ends. So we were right. What I like about this show is that everyone is double-crossing everyone. Morals are absolutely up for grabs. There's nothing they won't tackle. There's no sort of taboo they won't reach for. There's nothing off the table when it comes to, oh my God, you can't do that. You can't appeal to people on their disabilities. Oh my God, you can't appeal to people on their ethnic minorities. So, you know, this is a show that's willing to do all of those things, just like the real world of politics. And I think in a time of Trump and in a time of Brexit and Boris Johnson, this is the kind of show that I think Maddie would really enjoy it. There's some great riffs and jokes around political shenanigans and the opportunistic kind of attempts of aspirant politicians, and set within a high school setting, it's all the more funnier. And at the centre of it, Ben Platt is absolutely brilliant. I mean, I have to confess, in just one episode, he's holding the show together absolutely magnificently.